Hi, I'm Dean Sage.
And I'm Jack Curvin,
And this is Show Me Your Deck,
a podcast where we explore the intersections of oracles and chakras,
using our original decks to create new insights. So I was debating with you at the top of the show, how do we start the show? Mm-hmm. And we couldn't come to any kind of conclusion. So this is how we're starting the show. We're going to talk about starting the show.
Well, let's talk about it then.
I'm actually curious. So this is episode 5. How have they been feeling for you?
I've actually enjoyed the way they unfold. I enjoy the way the cards interplay with each other and not necessarily knowing what's going to happen when the first one is revealed. I personally am fine with the deck deciding what the theme is going to be. So I don't know if I even need to know beforehand.
I like the rolling of the dice. I've been playing some Dungeons and Dragons. We've had one session in 2 months because that's just how like the modern scheduling life works. Mm-hmm. But it is interesting to have sort of a random / universal control over what gets drawn. I like that about your decks.
Well, something else I've been working on lately is developing some new movement classes that are entirely based around chance systems. Ooh. So I am dice all over the place right now. So I'm very comfortable with just whirligigging it and seeing what happens.
Whirligigging it and see what happens. I like that. That's a good word, whirligig. Well, why don't we let the dice decide where we go?
Okay, so I will roll. The first die I'm going to roll has 4 sides. It'll tell us which deck we're going to pull from. Hold on just a moment. Deck number 1. This will be the the projections of joy. These are suggestions for enacting the ideas in the book. So now let's figure out which card it'll be. Number 46 of 49. So let me pull that out. Here we go. Number 46 of 49, redistribute spiritual wealth. Identify your treasures. Share without sacrificing. Receive without taking. This is where the crown chakra is influenced by the solar plexus. So how I know is affected by I do.
I know and I do. Okay. So we've got like this sense of bodily movement power mixing with that connection to the universe. Mm-hmm. And so for you, it's the distribution of spiritual wealth. That's a really interesting concept. Can you kind of expand on what you meant when you wrote that?
So redistribute spiritual wealth. At the time when I was writing this, I was trying to learn and understand better about these different political systems. And obviously, redistribution of wealth is very triggering for people. And I'm not saying that I'm advocating for redistributing people's physical wealth. I'm asking you to redistribute your spiritual wealth in such a way that everybody can have the same access to gratitude, the same access to joy, so that the accumulation of psychological and spiritual opportunity isn't focused only on a select group of people who have all these advantages and thus all these different access points to gratitude and joy. How do you redistribute that karmic intention so that everybody has a better chance at accessing gratitude and joy? So identify your treasures, not your physical treasures, your spiritual treasures. What are your sources of privilege, and how does that influence the way you send your intentions out into the world? Share without sacrificing. Receive without taking. Very specifically, I'm not trying to be a communist here. I'm not saying that your joy should be taken from you so that other people can have some. So share without sacrificing. If you, for example, let's say you have 2 of something and somebody else has 0. If you give one of yours to someone else and you both have 1, that is sharing. If you have 2 and they have 0 and they take 1 and you both have 1, that's not the same. You both still have 1, but it's not the same intention. It's not the same flow of spiritual wealth. Also, receive without taking. On the other side of that, when you are in need and somebody shares something with you and you receive it, that's not the same as you reaching out and snatching it or taking it. I'm asking everybody to voluntarily redistribute their intentionality for joy, so that what you do is not only for yourself, it's for everyone.
I'm feeling a couple things about this. So it was a long week. So I'm a little bit mentally tired. There was 2 weeks of vacation. Seemed like everybody was out of the office except for me. Mm-hmm. And when I came back this last week, every meeting that I couldn't have for 2 weeks, I had in 1 week.
Oh, wow.
So it was just wall to wall meetings. And so I spiritually feel drained today. So this card hits me different. And it's going to be interesting. We'll see what the other cards kind of have to say about this, but just my initial reaction is sharing spiritual wealth. I feel at a lack of spiritual wealth at the moment. So I almost like at first experience this card is like, ooh, that sounds even more draining.
But think about it, redistribute. Maybe you don't need to give any, maybe you need to receive. You're in a receiving, you're in a position for receiving right now. So if somebody has something good to share with you, accept it. You don't have a lot to share, so just receive.
So this card works both ways.
It works both ways. So redistribute doesn't mean that you have something taken away from you if you don't have it to give, because remember, you're supposed to share without sacrificing. You don't have anything to share right now, or not enough to share. You already feel out of lack. So let other people share with you. And that way you can receive without taking.
Okay. So I think then the focus of this reading is going to be the interplay of two or more. So I think we've definitely got a little bit of a community sense. This isn't you by yourself kind of reading. This is you in context kind of reading, because especially with the crown chakra, how could it be you by yourself? Like
exactly,
it's the opposite of the root.
That is exactly right. It is the point of access for your morality and your purpose, reaching out beyond yourself. That is the whole point of the crown chakra. Even more so than the heart chakra, which is about connections as well. But this goes beyond sharing and connecting, and actually understanding the purpose and the intent.
Mm-hmm. I'm feeling like my card comes next. So let's kind of see what we got here.
Okay.
Let's see what we got here. It's not as noisy today. It's probably because I'm feeling drained. Usually it's a little bit more buzzy in my head when I'm doing this, but I think
you're running on reserves right now.
Yeah. And I think, I've got a friend in the hospital that wants to do a reading, so I want to kind of build up towards that. It's hard at the end of a long week. All right. So I've got the 5 of Storms. This is appropriate. We were talking about the heart chakra just a second ago. We've pulled the heart chakra. The 5 of Storms. You do not own the wind, much less the storm.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
So here we are. This is for you. You need to receive without taking.
Yeah. For me, this card is that you can't take possession of the joy and even the grief. Like it's not yours. You were speaking about joy for your card. The heart chakra for me is about joy and grief. The interplay of those two things happening together. And this is a reminder that you can't take possession of it. Like people want to own it, and this is just a reminder that the wind's going to blow you. It's not yours. And definitely the storm is not yours. So you can't own it in the sense of take responsibility for it, but you can't own it in the sense of holding on to it either. It is what it is. It
is. And there is a way to harness some of the energy for your own benefit, like with wind turbines, perhaps, or if you want to think in terms of the way in which you're not just being randomly blown around, you're not completely helpless, but you don't own it either. You can redirect some of the energy for your benefit, but it's not generated by you and it's moving around you. It's not necessarily even about you, but you can dip into it and get something productive from it. It doesn't mean you have to lay claim to it.
For me, it's riding the wind. I think that this whole chakra to me, the love, joy, depression, grief, all of those kind of things are about riding the wind. It's different than the waves of emotions. These are the higher level emotions, the ones that don't have such groundedness and viscosity as water. These are the ones that are ephemeral and can completely upend you. If you lose the wind, you fall, and that's a horrible feeling. But when you're on top of the wind, it's joyous. You're being lifted up by unseen forces, and it's an amazing, wonderful time. So it's interesting.
It's like being a kite or being a bird hovering on the thermals.
No, exactly. It's exactly the images that kind of went through my head when I was designing this suit, the storm suit, which contrasts to the sword suit in the tarot, which I've always lamented how swords are always just feels like it's always a bad message. Like in the original tarot, when you pulled a sword, it would always be something bad. Well, it's double edged, and that's really kind of where this, I think, the suit got lost in over time, is that it just a lot of negatives came from it. But it's double edged. There's two edges to it, just like a storm is both good and bad. We just had massive storms in the Gulf, and I saw a video of a underpass, a 14-foot underpass, completely filled with water. Just to the sign that says 14 feet is water. That's a terrible outcome from the storm. But at the same time, the storm is what nourishes the crops and distributes the water and all the other things that it does. So it's hard, to be in love with a storm, but it's also hard to hate a storm.
Yeah, it's simply is what it is. It's energy running around doing whatever it's going to do.
So your card is talking about redistribution of wealth, of, kind of a equality of spiritual energy, and of a nurture. I think there's a nurturing and a receiving. So there's a passive and an active sense to what you were talking about. My card is a little bit more on the passive side, but I think, as you mentioned, that's because I pulled it. That's just where I am right now.
That's where you are.
Is on the passive side. So I think it's interesting. So as much as your card's talking about, redistributing spiritual wealth, I think my card is referring to being able to accept what you can receive. So I think, as this reading is evolving, it's about looking for connections among you and a person or you and a group, and then being willing to allow that energy to flow as it flows, to not try to control it. So as much as you have an active role to yours, I think that there's sort of an emanation versus directional. So the energy of your card is sort of emanating outward and connecting.
I push back a little bit and say that it's both, because remember, there's sharing here. Mm-hmm. And so if you're in a mode to be active, be active. If you're in a mode to be passive, be passive.
Well, that's to me, like, that's the emanation. So it's like there's an aura
gotcha.
of it here. And that aura is both passive and active almost simultaneously. Mm-hmm. And where there is abundance, it flows. And where there is lack, it is received.
It's like diffusion and osmosis, where there's a high concentration and a barrier. You move across that barrier to where there's less concentration, just allow some equilibrium to happen. And in your card, that equilibrium is simply intention. It's like, let your intention dictate how much you're bringing in or taking out.
It's very interesting that you went to cellular biology there. I find that very, very interesting, because there is something almost automatic and subconscious about what we're talking about. There is something where if your card's calling attention to it, right? Your card is saying, be aware of it. So the reading here is saying, be aware of this process that occurs, but it occurs naturally. So like the storm, it occurs naturally. And there's a cellular nature to it, so that it's in our very, being within us, within our spiritual creature, whatever form that is, whatever shape that takes. These sort of emanations and connections are happening without our knowledge. So I think, the reading here is saying, be aware of it, be intentional about it. What's the name of your deck for this one? Remind me.
These are The deck number 1 is the projections of joy.
Projections. Okay. So this is, reminders for actions that you can take, reminders for states of being that you can encompass. So I think it's reminding us that we are here. We are emanating. We are constantly interacting. We're constantly at high levels of concentration and low levels of concentration. There's people that have more, there's people that have less, and it's all around us.
Would you like to know the affirmation that goes with this?
I think I would.
Okay, so number 46 of 49 as an affirmation is, I profess that I know my actions motivate others to perform goodness. So looking at the projection for that, if your actions are motivating others to perform goodness, then sometimes the goodness is sharing the wealth, and sometimes it's receiving aid. And that's why I went where I did with the projection. And that helps clarify it a little bit for me, because I wrote this quite some time ago, and 46 practically never comes up.
Really?
It just never does. And the image for this one was a lighthouse.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So the way in which a lighthouse sends that single beam of light out into the dark to guide ships away from the rocks.
And there's an active passivity about a lighthouse. It doesn't move. It's a passive, entity, but its emanations are rolling out over large distances at night. Very large distances.
Yeah, very large distances. And it's interesting because you were mentioning swords earlier and how they are double-sided. The haiku for this one is, sharp beckoning guide. Your flame's blade lacerates gloom, parries knife-edged rocks. So everything about this intersection is about helping in whatever way is best for the person who is being helped. If they need to receive, let them receive. If they need to give something to you, let them do that as well.
Mm-hmm. This is a very, very interesting intersection. I really am enjoying this. I'm conflicted. I'm conflicted about whether I draw one of my cards or you draw one of your cards. What are you feeling?
I want to hear from yours again.
Okay. I kind of have the same feeling. So let's dig back in. This connection's waking up. It's feeling a little bit more active.
Good. Then let's definitely ride that energy.
All right. Okay. So we have the throat chakra. Or I'm sorry, the brow chakra just came up. So we have number 9 of the major arcana called Reflect. What's the point of messages if you aren't looking?
Oh God, yes.
So this chakra kind of talks about that insight that you have. The connection to the universe is the one right above it, but here you're seeing, and you're intuiting in spiritual ways versus the physical ways that as you kind of rise up the body. You go through the physical sensations, and this is a bit more of that spiritual sensation. I think it's pretty clear and to the point. This is kind of why I love my messages. Is that
can you read it again?
Yeah. What's the point of messages if you aren't looking?
Mm-hmm. Within the context of this reading, I would say that that's a reminder to, for example, you're going to do this reading with your friend who's not well.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that you can only give so much before it becomes sacrificing. So when you go into this reading later, remember to be careful about how much you put into it, so that you actually are feeding this friend healing energy and not your very spiritual life reserves. So just remember that. Remember that. Here's this card telling you that here's a message, but it's not going to help you if you don't remember that going forward.
I like that. I think also, to me, in the context of the reading, the image of the lighthouse is very, very poignant. I thank you for sharing, the other intersections. And that's why I love your system, because all 4 of your decks, your book, all of your messages are intertwined. So when you pull one from one deck, it doesn't stand alone. It carries all of the imagery and metaphors of all the other decks of all the other ways to access your point, because your Professions of Joy, which is the book, encompasses all of them. So it's a cohesive message. So, I find it very timely that the lighthouse is the metaphor for the redistribution, because it could have been many different things. You could have gone many different ways with that. But the idea of this sort of passive stand that then shares its light, because it's not really giving it up, it's just creating it.
And also, at least with modern lighthouses, I don't know about ancient ones, that beam of light is generally sent out by a mirror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
whether it's a flame or a bulb or whatever.
It's a very strong light source in a mirror, yeah.
Yeah, and then they just bounce it off a mirror, and here we are talking about reflection.
So I also personally, because my deck is very sassy, I'm not sure I intentionally meant that. I think that's maybe just a projection of myself. My deck is very sassy, and it's also, as a reminder here that if these things are speaking to you, they're speaking to you. Like, don't close yourself off, because this is the third eye. So don't close yourself off from messages. I don't believe that the universe's randomness is always intentional and speaking to you, and everything that you see is some sort of message, but there are messages. And this is sort of a reminder, like, what's the point? Like, if the universe is going to speak to you, what's the point if you're not going to listen to it, if you're not going to be receptive to it? So I think this goes back to, sort of the aura that we were kind of referring to, that emanation. I think this is more people to people. So other people are giving you messages. Other people are giving you light, like the lighthouse. They're warning you or guiding you, whichever way you want to kind of take the role of a lighthouse. And you've got to be receptive to that. You've got to be interested in that as a person.
I like that. That's a very concise way of describing that. That's nice.
All right, so we've got a lot of intersections happening. We're very high, right? We've got crown, brow, heart. So we're kind of high up in the body. I think whenever I'm high up in my body like that, it's usually anxiety has kind of pulled me up. Like we talk about physically, like your shoulders get pulled up when you get anxious. Mm-hmm. Like your whole core sort of shifts away from your actual core, and you start to feel topsy-turvy. You start to feel off balance. A lot of times I think I've heard people describe it as like, it's like the ground's not beneath you. Like you don't feel your root connection anymore because you've been pulled too high. Right. So I'm going to be curious. I wonder if the root is going to come up in this reading. I wonder if there's going to be a groundedness to all of this before we're done.
Yeah, that would be interesting, because usually our readings cut across the entire spectrum. Mm-hmm. So far, the furthest down we've gone is solar plexus. So nothing for the viscera, nothing for the root.
I would say at this point, if this is really resonating with you, even if the root doesn't come up in this reading, be conscious of it. You can't emanate. You can't be the lighthouse unless you are very, very physically grounded.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Like, think about what a lighthouse is. It has to have a perfect foundation, because it's there specifically to ride out storms on high places, usually like cliff sides or something where the wind is really powerful and the storms are really battering this building. You have to have a good foundation to be a proper lighthouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in a way, the roots already come into the picture with the metaphor of the lighthouse. So even again, if we've got two more cards left in this reading, if we don't pull the root chakra specifically for a reminder or a message, it's part of this. You can't exist spiritually without existing physically, at least not in this state of being.
Not as we know the world as it is right now.
Mm-hmm. And if you aren't grounded, all that spiritual energy can just be crazy making.
Definitely.
It can just rampage through your mind. And sometimes, we often talk about balance and out of balance. In out of balance crown chakra and out of balance third eye is very detrimental. It can be very hyperactive and very distracting. Imagine being able to hear everyone's thoughts at the same time. It would be overwhelming.
I don't even want to hear mine half the time. It's like-
Oh my goodness. I'm feeling your card. Let's
All right.
let's get some more input from one of your decks.
Let's figure out which deck it will be. Deck number 4. So these are the perceptions of joy. These will be the haiku from the book In Isolation.
Of course it is, because we're very heady today.
Yes. And actually they are probably the most intellectually dense. But let's figure out which card it'll be. Number 40.
Oh, okay. So we're staying high. We're staying up there in the chakras.
All right, well, there's more fire in this one. This is water and fire, so moving down one level out of the crown into the third eye. But what you see, what you perceive, what you know, what you learn, what you understand, how that is influenced by what you're doing. Okay? Scalding mists propel. Burning thoughts revolve, evolve. Glistening pyre. So we'll do that again.
Mm-hmm.
Scalding mists propel. Burning thoughts revolve, evolve. Glistening pyre.
We've got that brilliant light again, right? We've got propel. I like that idea of steam hissing as if released from a valve. At least that's the image that kind of came to my mind as you read that. And it's interesting. I like how you had evolve in there as kind of a, not a speed bump, but do you know what I mean? Like in poetry, I can't think of the right word for it, but if you're telling a joke, it's the moment where you change things for effect to kind of call attention to something. Like it gets away from your metaphor ever so slightly enough that it calls attention back to that progression from liquid to gas to plasma. That as heat increases, water does evolve. Until it becomes the life-bringing sun, that's in the sky above us.
Well, the image for this one, when water is influenced by fire, I was thinking about steam and steam engines, and the way in which the power of both of those elementals gets released into something very, very productive by way of repetition. So you might start with a steam engine, but then you end up with something way bigger than that, like a nuclear power plant. These are all steam turbines, right? So it's taking what you know and using it to take action. The idea that as you keep learning and keep experimenting and keep doing, you get better and better, more refined. Within the context of this reading, I would say, looking back at your card about reflection, while you're reflecting, you are in the process of reconsidering, understanding more deeply, refining, getting better at understanding when it is your time to give and when it is your time to receive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would say within the context of this reading, it's looking at a personal evolution towards emotional maturity. Learning when to say yes, learning when to say no, learning when to be open, learning when to be closed. So, the scalding mists propel, burning thoughts revolve, evolve, glistening pyre. Every word in that haiku is either a water or a fire word or both. So scalding, that's fire. Mists, it's water. Burning, fire. Thoughts from the third eye is water. Glistening, I would call that fire. Pyre is definitely fire. But glistening it implies that the light is reflecting off something either wet or in some way
reflective,
which is very much water. So everything about the very words in the haiku is looking at the way in which ideas can become more and more refined.
I don't often talk about it. At least I should say I haven't yet talked about it much on this podcast in 5 episodes. But my major arcana are actually intersections. in that when they repeat, so there's 3 sets of 7 in the major arcana, and then there's the celestial in my deck, or the fool in the regular tarot, which is sort of the 22nd card. But there's a sequence of 7, 7, 7, 7, which is where I got the chakras from for my deck. Because there's 7, there's major arcana, minor arcana. And if you add those repetitions up with the 3 7s in the major, you get 7 total cycles throughout the deck. But reflect is actually the brow chakra revisiting the sacral chakra.
Oh.
So, and in my system, that's water.
Oh.
So it is actually itself, and it's a reflection, and the character. So in the throat chakra, you meet 7 characters in my deck, and the character that refers to the sacral chakra is the oracle.
Oh, more emanation.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's a little bit more of a complicated, part of my interpretations, but I think it's very appropriate because we have water, which is nature's mirror. We have reflect, and reflect itself is water touching the brow chakra. If using your methodology, that's kind of what it would be. So it's interesting. We are descending. we are kind of going down a little bit.
Well, it reminds me of the waves you were just mentioning earlier in the reading. We're going up and down, riding this storm, and I think learning to navigate those storms and understanding where you are, whether you're at the crest or the nadir, helps you understand how you're supposed to continue navigating safely.
Safe navigation. I think you just kind of hit it there. I think this is a more of an internal reminder. This is more of an internal message. So as much as it's causing you to look outward and understand what's around you, I think it's causing you to look outward and qualify what's around you, what's emanating around you. Because if spiritual wealth is going to be redistributed, right, it's going to happen. It's like diffusion in cells. It will occur. It's a physical process. There's no mechanism that's causing it. It's merely the way that the diffusion works. Who around you is diffusing? What kind of emanations are around you that you're absorbing? What are you sending out? What's the state of this aura that surrounds you and surrounds the other people around you? And I haven't heard harmony yet, but I get the sense that that's what's needed. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the last card is. But we've got warning, we've got guidance, we've got messaging, we've got the light reaching out across the darkness. We've got all of these different things. But is there a harmony to this? Is there a balance to this? I'm not sure. We have the power chakra, I'm so sorry, I can't remember the name of it all of a sudden. The core.
Solar plexus.
Thank you, solar plexus. Like we have, the turning point. We have the heart, which is the balance of the bridge, the balance of the chakras. So we have balance in here, but I haven't quite have seen a harmonious, interplay yet.
As you described this, what it reminds me of in music is Stravinsky, who took Schoenberg's serial system and brought emotion and drama back into it. So with that 12-tone system, you just could figure out patterns to create sounds and not worry about if it was traditionally harmonious. And it ended up creating a lot of music that people sometimes consider unlistenable. I disagree. I think it's absolutely magnificent. My favorite composer is Webern, who was one of Schoenberg's students. But what Stravinsky did was take the concept of the almost random nature of the 12-tone system and bring meaning back into it, and discovering new harmonies and new rhythms and new meters, and figuring out how to take those same 12 notes that everybody else has been using in the West and putting them back together after Schoenberg deconstructed it, and finding a way in the midst of all that musical chaos to tell stories again, like the Firebird Suite or the
I
Rite
was
of
just
Spring.
thinking of the Firebird Suite. Rite of Spring is harder to listen to. It's for me. It's because there's more content.
Well, like the Dance of the Firebird, if you consider that unlistenable, then I don't understand why you even say that you like music, because that's one of the most amazing pieces of music ever written. When he first wrote it, the dancers that were supposed to be learning the choreography considered it undanceable. Can you imagine that? The Dance of the Firebird, because it was new to them. They couldn't figure out what to do with all these shifting meters and rhythms, and it was absolutely foreign to them. And now every modern dance company worth anything at all choreographs the Firebird Suite. And it's interesting that as material becomes more and more familiar, it's easier for people to find their way back in. So within the reading today, even if we don't find traditional harmony in this reading, I would say sit with it and figure out what points of it can become familiar and almost quasi-comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
That you can become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
I'm reminded, because you talk about the meters. There's a lot of prime numbers in the asymmetrical meters, because they 3 8 7 8 5 and I have always very oddly found prime numbers even in a way. And I think that's why I really do enjoy asymmetrical rhythms in music, because there's a larger symmetry to them. So as they play out, there's a piece that I played in handbells that I absolutely adore, called Tempest. And appropriately, it's about a storm. And it's written in two pieces, two halves. There's the sort of gathering of the storm, where that energy is sort of moving and sizzling and building and growing, and the billowing clouds, and the darkness is coming, and the anticipation of it. And they use a 5/8 rhythm that's do 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 do, and it has a symmetry to it. As it flows over 10 beats, it becomes even again. But it's that da 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 da, and it just has this amazing
that longer cyclicality, if I'm going to coin a word.
Yes,
I guess.
Yes.
This nature that you have to pay attention to them longer to get anything out of them.
And it's beautiful because there's a beautiful rhythm. It's do 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 do, like it just has this, but because there's this very rhythmic, like we're underneath it. I don't know if you've ever seen handbells. If you haven't, it's
I love it.
Go to YouTube. The piece is on YouTube. It's beautiful. It's called Tempest. Raleigh Ringers, which is appropriate for the group that it was written for, is called the Raleigh Ringers, which is of course very near to Jack's home,
North Carolina.
So they're called the Raleigh Ringers. It's an excellent group. I think my group played it a little better because we took it a little faster, but that was also my college bravado. But we're the handbells are brass bells, and they're very curious because they're percussive instruments, but they're toned. So it's like playing a piano, but where a piano kind of has that string that continues to vibrate, the bells have a very fast decay and then a very long tail. If you think of a church bell ringing, after the last bell, you can still hear it. It's still emanating in the air. We talk about emanations. But yeah, there's this very percussive, do 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 do, and then there's this beautiful melody over the top of it.
I love that.
And then when the storm breaks, so when the rain starts to fall, then it becomes very symmetrical. And it's a
wow. It almost reminds me of what's his name? Is it John Adams, the composer that did Short Ride in a Fast Car or something like that?
I'm not sure.
It reminds me of that. It's marvelous with all these different experiences all happening on top of each other in fast succession, and just really exciting. What you're describing reminds me of that.
I find I think it's interesting. This is we've taken a little bit of of a tangent here, which is fine because I think it's very fitting because we have been playing with water, we have been playing with storms, we have been playing with all of these things that are percussive, jagged rocks in your and then steam from your haiku and all these things that are percussive and not quite harmonious.
No, and it's a very now that you say that, looking back on the first 4 cards, it's a very energetically dynamic reading. It didn't I didn't see it that way at first, but now
there's a lot of energy.
Storms and rocks and reflection and blades of light cutting through the darkness. It's actually quite a tumultuous reading in some ways.
I'm gonna pull the last card from my deck.
Okay.
I have a good inclination about it. Okay. Well, if you hadn't guessed it already, we're ending with storms.
Okay.
And of all the cards, we're ending with the source of storms. Do not look to the storm to lift you up. So in my system, I've taken the court cards and I've degendered them. The whole point of my deck was to degender. My spouse is non-binary, and I had a hard time connecting with the tarot because it was always talking about these masculine, feminine distinctions, and that's a hard concept when you don't feel particularly masculine or particularly feminine, or in my case where I don't like the gender norms that were like the Victorian gender norms that had kind of seeped their way into the modern tarot. So the source is also the Queen card. So just, the source of storms would be the Queen of Swords in the regular tarot. But here it's the source in my system is where you embody the element. So where you become the source of that element rather than experiencing. So the rest of the sequence is experiencing the element, experiencing the emotion, experiencing the feeling, experiencing whatever the element brings you. And then when you reach the source, you embody it. So you now are the source of the storm. You are the source of your joy and your grief. It is
what we are. We definitely are that. I think we forget that. So it's a good reminder here at the end.
So yeah, we go right back to storms, which is appropriate because we were just talking about them. So yeah, it's a very energetic, very dynamic reading that kind of comes back to what we just sort of finalized, which was this sort of disharmonious harmony, this very energy. So if I were to put a capstone on it, the energy that you possess or that you lack will diffuse between you and your connections, the people around you.
Oh, that was beautifully said. God, I'm going to have to write that down.
And being aware of it, being intentional with it, understanding when you're giving and when you're receiving. I've never liked the term psychic vampire, but it sort of fits here for a moment, which is there are people I think that are unintentionally draining on others. They're unintentionally out of balance and just they're like the tide pool. They're like the maelstrom. They just suck any energy around them in. I think this is a message to think intentionally about where you are and not, find yourself, becoming a vacuum, becoming out of balance, but be intentional about allowing the emanations in. I think that's what I'm hearing for myself is allow the emanations in, but do it intentionally. Don't just sort of look to others to give you back what you are spiritually lacking.
Well, especially remembering that vacuuming energy up the way hurricanes do or tornadoes or you yourself as the storm, the more you pull in, the more power you're bringing to that storm in the first place. So to your point, it's very important to understand what you're drawing into yourself. That maelstrom, like on Jupiter, for example, there's that red spot is a storm like bigger than 10 Earths that's been going on for like 1,000 years or something. It just keeps feeding itself and feeding itself. Make sure that you're allowing that dispersion that you were mentioning a moment ago, that the diffusion of energy. You're not just unconsciously like a black hole or something sucking all the light out of the universe, sucking all the energy out of the room. And if you are in a position where you need to receive, fine, but do it without taking.
Mm-hmm. Do it without taking. That's I think that, and taking can be unintentional. I think I keep coming back to that intention versus unintention, because the first card set us with that distinction, is intention versus unintention. Be intentional, even in your lack, even in your need. Be intentional. Take, or not take, but experience of others, receive of others. There we go. Receive of others intentionally. And in turn, you can allow that energy to flow elsewhere as needed. The redistribution idea is that even if you're receiving today, does not mean that you won't be, giving as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. It's a great reading. That's fabulous.
That's a great place for our normal show to end. We're still giving a free preview of our subscription to come, which is our time where we kind of talk a little bit more personally about how the reading affects us. So we're going to move into that now. So I know I started this by saying I was drained.
Yes.
And I think it was very interesting how the reading kind of went that way. I think as a reader, it's hard. I think that you always influence the reading, because the reading is about a connection of two people, at least. So when I read tarot for someone, it's a connection about me and them. So it's as much a comment about how I'm experiencing them as what they are emanating toward me. And I think that's an interesting, I think that the way that this reading went is almost a reminder to readers that you can never fully divorce yourself from it. Like, as much as you might put up spiritual barriers or cast spells or, do the many things that you do to try to balance yourself before you start reading, to remove your own energy and to kind of keep it back. It leaks out. It can't not. It's diffusion. It happens. And I think a lot of people that come to readings are coming receptively. So I think that there is that motion, no matter what happens. It's the same problem that we have when we talk about objective facts. And I think it's why people love math so much, because math is perhaps the most objective thing that we can do, because it does seem to exist independent of human observation. It seems to exist within nature, but you can never be truly objective, and I don't think that's true of readings either. So I take it as a message to me, to remember that part of things, but I also take it as a message, a larger message for me, that it's okay to receive. I think, especially in the work that I do, I give. I organize, I take care of things. I take things off people's plates. I'm a business manager. I'm an operations manager. So I'm there to make everything easier, to make everything fluid and functional, and to make sure that everybody has what they need at the right time so that they can do their work. It's a very draining proposition at times. And I think this is a reminder to allow others to help, me to receive from others, to not be so wholly independent.
So then my question to you is, do you have people in your life who do that for you?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. And you let them do that for you, and you don't even have to ask. They just, their giving nature diffuses some of this back to you without you even have to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you,
okay, good.
You, my friend who's in the hospital, unfortunately, my spouse, even actually, interestingly, more recently, my father, which had never been the case growing up. My father was an unintentional receiver for most of his life. He was a walking wound, and he's very recently gone into counseling for that walking wound. It was, as a child, and this is probably why I became the operations manager that I became. I was the household operations manager. I healed and brought and changed. And, if dinner needed to be decided, somehow I was the decider, even though I was 10 years old. Here I am, organizing ourselves so that we have sustenance for the day. The translating between mother and father, what intention each had and how they were at cross purposes and how they could come together and understand each other. For most of my life, my father was just a gaping wound from his childhood. But recently, it's been a little bit more, equal footing, and I felt less tired, after experiencing him, because he's no longer draining. He's conscious of it. He's aware of it.
Okay. Well, and that specifically refers back to the cards we were just pulling, being aware of the way in which you're channeling energy out or in.
Where does the reading find you?
So I'm going through a process of pivoting in my business, moving away from private one-on-one sessions with personal training and wellness coaching clients and trying to create content for group classes. And I'm not sure exactly how this flows directly from the reading. No, I take that back. I do understand. I have already run into a situation where somebody is implying that I am going to end up stealing all their students. This is not possible because I am very specifically making sure that my content and my scheduling has nothing to do with hers. And looking back at the reading, the reflection card, the reflect card, I am very, very specifically not undermining her or anybody else. I've been interviewing lots of students and instructors to find out what they even want from classes. I don't feel like throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. Just tell me what you want. Community, what do you want? So when I encountered this person who I regard as a friend, hitting back at me with this lack mentality, it threw me off balance. And I started questioning whether or not my intentions were good. And they are. So in this context of giving and receiving, I'm trying to make sure that what I'm offering is not the same as everybody else's, not only because I don't find that as interesting, but because I don't want to be seen as some new interloper who's jumping into the teaching pool and further diluting everybody's ability to draw students to class. I am putting so very much positive intention into this, and I am so specifically aware of it that I am no longer allowing her fear to interrupt my process. And the only way I could do that is knowing so clearly what my intention is. And I was able to put her at ease. This didn't have to be a conflict. I even spent the day with her yesterday. We went to a live music festival. So that conflict, I feel, has been resolved. And if she has any more moments of fear, I'll just keep reminding her that I am mindful of when her classes happen. And I don't want to do anything that undermines her offerings. What she's offering, although it's movement-based, is nothing like what I'm offering. At the beginning of the episode, I had mentioned how much I'm leaning into chance systems and improvisation. And that very specifically is what is driving the content for this new class. There is a structure, but the description of it has to be both specific and not specific simultaneously. So people know to come in expecting only structure and some movement, but to not have any attachments to what the content itself will be, because that will be decided randomly each time. Once I explained that to her, she felt better. And I was able to hear her without taking too much of her fear inside of me. So I think this is an example of being aware of what you're pulling into yourself. You mentioned the source of storms. I was not going to suck up all that type of energy. I'm trying to redistribute spiritual wealth, not spiritual privation, poverty.
I have to give you an affirmation here, and it's a little long-winded, so I apologize. In therapy, there are many different modalities. There's the one that insurances love because it shows results on a spreadsheet. Cognitive behavioral therapy. It works for a lot of people. It really does. It's structured. You actually use affirmations and you combat your negative thinking. You do all sorts of tactics and activities, and then you measure your output using forms and reports. And it's very effective for a lot of people. And not only is it effective, but you can study it. So science loves it because you can look at the effects of it. That's one end of the spectrum. There's an entirely other end of the spectrum called metaphor therapy. And where cognitive behavioral therapy is limited at times, you get 8 sessions, and then, if you score too low, you can maybe get another 8 more. There's the ongoing talk therapies where you just sort of come in, it's the same routine. You talk about something different each time, but the therapist is there to kind of guide you through your emotions and your feelings and your situations, and to push back and ask pointed questions. There's a ebb and flow to it, but it's very cyclical in nature. And then there's metaphor therapy. And what metaphor therapy does is very, very quickly, very precisely cuts through all of the cognitive bullshit and goes straight towards the root metaphors that drive your being. And these root metaphors are childhood images that have been with you for as long as you can remember, but you've never ever looked at them because no one has ever guided you to them. That is what you do. You cut through all of the cyclical nature. You cut through all of the routine, all the things that are almost mindless, and you move towards a state of pure intention, and you encounter something so raw and so deep that it's unrepeatable, but you can carry forth, we talked about emanations, you can carry forth the emanation of it. I had a metaphor of my own where I was a child lost in a storm, naked and wandering, and there was no one there. And I had not realized how absolutely foundational that was to my life. It's why I respond to the sword suit so much, and it's why I rewrote the storms the way that I rewrote them, because it's as close to my core metaphor as I've ever gotten, and I had to re-narrate the core metaphor. And I think that's the real magic of what you do, is that metaphor therapy is about re-narrating. Trauma survivors go through this. They can't change the trauma, but they can re-narrate the core metaphor that it says about them as a person. And that is what your classes do, because they are totally embodying, totally encompassing, and they absolutely get toward the core elements of the chakras that you're dealing with in a way that talking or affirmations or cognitive behavioral therapies can never do. So anyone can take dance classes, anyone can take movement classes, and they are beneficial, but no one but you that I've seen can take the movement of the body and tie it to the movement of the soul.
Oh, God. Thank you. I wasn't ready for that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So yes, never let others' anxieties and fears diffuse into your own in this sphere.
Well, thank you. That was an extraordinary affirmation. I've never had one like that before. I think I'm going to have to own that one completely. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Well, kind of brings us to the end of our episode. For those that can find you places, where can they find you places?
Come find me on Instagram at 49haiku, the number 4, the number 9, HAIKU. I'm also at 49haiku.com.
And where you find me, you can find me at Dean Sage Media. I'm not very active on a lot of things. I do go on Instagram, so feel free to message me there. We'll be posting some of the clips from the show to that. Also, Show Your Deck, showyourdeck.com. So Show Your Deck, it's your deck at your deck on Instagram. And then showyourdeck.com is the website where you can kind of get access to our books and our decks and interact with us. This show is ad free because the whole show is an ad. So please purchase our content and support us. We love doing this, and we hope to make this our thing, and so that I don't have to chase operations other places. I can chase operations here.
Exactly. Help us help you.
Have a wonderful day.